going on, gentlemen? Today I'm going to be open loop converting the Comanche. I'm going to see if I can get this done today. As you may be aware, the 1987 to 1990 Jeep Comanche and Cherokee with the 4-liter used a closed loop cooling system with a pressure bottle to regulate internal pressures rather than a spring-loaded radiator cap. Closed loop is not technically an accurate name for it. Both systems are a closed loop type of cooling system, but they just say open loop to differentiate the one with the radiator cap. The more technical name would be sealed system and recovery system. But the closed loop cooling system has quite a few disadvantages, while the open loop system is the way to go. First thing we need is a radiator with a cap on it. This one came from Bunny. I traded an engine for it. You need some heater hoses. You need... we shouldn't need that. You need the overflow tank, but it doesn't have to be this bottle. All it needs to be is a bottle. As you can see on a Renix, there isn't really room to properly mount this thing over here anyway. I've seen people try to fab the 91 plus overflow tank in here. You know, you could put it way back in this corner if you want, or anywhere else you could possibly imagine. But like I said, it doesn't need to be this bottle. You could actually just stick the overflow tube into a water bottle if you wanted. But what I'm going to be doing is using a 2.5 liter overflow tank. For the Renix years and the 2.5 engines, they actually have the coolant overflow tank nicely situated right here between the airbox and the fender. And it's kind of a really tight fit on a 4 liter. And we do, of course, also need to bypass and delete the fuel pump ballast resistor, the EGR relay, which is technically a federal crime, and just move the fan relay off of the fender. This usually mounts like right here, but I just broke the little mount thing and I'm going to shove it right there. And another thing, on the Renix there is also a temperature sensor in the radiator for the electric fan if equipped. Now, not all of the Renixes are going to have an electric fan. This one does though, so I'm going to need to get that sensor out of the radiator. And on all the 91 plus radiators, you'll see there's this little delete plug here that we should be able to just unscrew. Next, I'm going to tackle the radiator support across the top. There's 4 nuts that thread into the back of the header panel under this lip, but all 4 of those are gone. And then you got 3 bolts, 10mm on each of the sides. Those ones are gone too, so this has clearly been out of here probably many times before. I do have the service records for this truck, and pretty much every time it was taken into the shop for repairs, it was because it was overheating. So in the past, this thing has gone through a lot of cooling system components because they could never figure out how to keep it shut. I got it on video. Well, now I gotta let that boil over. Over here we gotta take off the battery tie down, and this is on here upside down. So yeah, somebody's definitely had the radiator out before. Now the radiator is just kind of loosely sitting in there. So we're going to unplug this hose. We're going to undo this mount down here. There's a transmission cooler line, bolts to that with a 8mm, but that's long rusted away. So I just had it zip tied. And then unplug the cooler lines. So I want to drain the coolant first so that we don't get coolant into the transmission lines. I think it's a lot better if we accidentally get transmission fluid in the cooling system. This fitting here, you're going to want to PB a lot. This will get stuck and just unthread itself from the radiator. Oh, there we go. Wow. Shit, look what happens when you PB things. So now we're going to be leaking transmission fluid a little bit. You're never going to lose more than about a quart when you take these off. And the lower one, let's see, is just a quick disconnect. Let's see, just squeeze the two little tabs and it comes right off. Okay. I could have sworn that was different on these older ones. I thought there was like a little metal hook you had to like pry off, and then it just, I don't know where I've seen that. Okay, then we're going to also unplug this sensor, which that connector is just buried under the intake for the air box. Now, this truck does have AC, so there is a condenser in here. That might cause some problems, but I guess not. There we go. So I'm also going to rip this out of here because it will never have AC. So the lines have already been cut over here. I think I'm just going to cut them again just to fish them out from behind the battery. But yeah, I'm gonna take this out as well. Obviously, don't cut AC lines when there's pressure in the system. As you can see, there's nothing left. So I'm deleting the AC. So I don't really care about destroying 40-year-old AC parts. And it should go without saying, you don't need to take this out. If you're just open loop swapping, you can leave that in there. Oh, that's the VIN plate. Wow. A relic. This is the headlight harness. It appears as if its mounts have broken long ago. But now that we got the radiator out, we can start working on all this nonsense up here. So the upper hose can stay, that's the same. But we got to get the heater hoses out of here because we're just going to plug the heater hoses directly into the heater core. All of the rest of this shit is completely useless. It's an interesting little thing about the Renix expansion bottle is it's only mounted in here with a rubber band because it needs to stretch and contract. And a rubber band allows it to do that. So remove the rubber band and then the bottle comes right out of here. And I'm gonna disconnect a lot of the hose clamps. Well, firstly because they're good usable hose clamps, and secondly because all the hoses are just wrapped and tangled around everything. So I don't know, I'll just start here, I guess. Oh, there's still coolant and everything. Yeah, there it goes, boys. Finally, the gloves are off. Another thing this swap does is delete the heater valve. So we can unplug the vacuum line for it and well, that's probably why it didn't work. Never really looked into that because I knew I'd be deleting it someday. Okay, so now the heater should work as intended. It's kind of sticky, but it still works. Okay, so I got all the hoses out of here. The vacuum line for the heater valve, I just zip tied around itself, so hopefully that doesn't leak. I'm going to leave the remainder of the AC lines right here just because we have the big 7 fuse thing mounted to it. You know what, it works. And I took off the upper radiator hose just so I'd had room to get to this one. On normal Renix water pumps, this metal pipe that comes off it just kind of ends right here. This is a 91 plus water pump and pipe. It fit right on there. The only difference was this metal piece, it instead points back that way. Now this whole bracket can come off of here. There's a bolt in there and right here. I think I'm just gonna cut it right there so I can leave this thing mounted to it for now. This is a temperature control knob that Cam put in here. It's aftermarket stuff. It has a little probe that you stab into the fins of the radiator, and when the radiator gets hot, it turns on the electric fan. So for whatever reason, the stock fan stopped working. When the engine got hot, the E-fan wouldn't turn on anymore. Something wrong with that sensor, I think. But instead of investigating the problem, Cam just did a Band-Aid thing. But honestly, I like this better because you can turn this to adjust it. So you can decide how hot you want it to be when the fan turns on instead of the default setting to whatever the factory was. Anyway, got this bracket cut, and now we can start putting it back together. We've got the lower heater hose routed here from the water pump to the heater core. The upper one, same thing, from the thermostat to the heater core, very basic, just like it is on 97 plus. And then we're going to put the radiator in, and then the coolant bottle, and that'll be it. Before we put the radiator in, we're going to need to get this sensor out of the old one. I suppose you could just buy a new sensor, and like I said earlier, I think this sensor's dead anyway. It appears to be a 33 millimeter, and I don't even have a crescent wrench that opens that wide. So I was able to just cram this big ass socket over it, trying not to break the wires. And I can unscrew it by hand. I didn't need a ratchet or anything. They definitely got some pretty intense sealant on here. Oh, they even got a plastic, or probably used to be rubber, seal. Okay, well that's all that thing is. I don't have an Allen bit for whatever size this is, but a T60 Torx fits in there okay enough. I'm going to make sure this actually goes in here before I put any sealant on it. Yeah, look at that. It's the same thread pitch. Wow. So there was a little rubber O-ring on this. I might try to get that off and put it on here. Alright, I cleaned up the threads on it with a wire brush, and I took the O-ring that was off of the plastic cap. It is a little dry rotted because this radiator came out of a Jeep. It's not a new radiator. Okay, so I got it in there, you know, as tight as I could with this. And it's in there good, and I still have the sensor for the fan, even though it probably doesn't work, but that's proof it can be done. Out of curiosity, I was looking at the connector and how Cam had this aftermarket temperature sensor thing wired up. And he just cut the stock wire. So the stock system is never going to work again unless I reconnect the stock wire. So in that case, I don't think I'm going to hook it up. I think I'm just going to put the rubber stopper back in this radiator and just not have this sensor because it doesn't work anyway. The factory wire's been sabotaged, and I'm going to 96 swap the whole thing. So all of this is completely futile. But the important thing is, it can be done. Before I do anything, I want to make sure the transmission lines fit and connect. So we got to get this little plastic thing off of the old radiator and just clip right in there. And then this. Oh, look at that! Hopefully that doesn't leak, and we'll see if the thread pitch is the same on this upper one. This one really likes to cross thread. It's a process. Yeah, I'm definitely going to need two hands, because like I said, yeah, that one loves cross thread. Yep, that sucker just threaded right on there. So they're the same size. I was not expecting that. So now, because this radiator isn't rusted out, we can actually use that little mount down there for this line and start plugging in the rest of our hoses. Upper hose secured, transmission line secured, lower hose secured. Now we can put in the radiator support. Now we just got to tighten down all the bolts for the shrouds, the fan, and the support. I think this calls for a montage. And with that, we're basically done. Now it has a radiator cap, and it is kind of tight with this right here, but it fits. I wonder if this piece changed to fit the radiator cap in there, but there's no clearance issues. It goes right on there. It's so cool to see in this truck. It's never had a radiator cap. So at this point, we just got the bottle and the overflow tank to worry about. But technically, you don't actually even need a bottle to run a recovery style system. You just won't have a backup reservoir. I seen the 2.5 bottle idea from a Facebook post, and it is a really tight fit with the wires under here, which I guess the 2.5 doesn't have. You really got to cram that thing in there. And like I said, you got to delete the EGR relay, move the fan relay, and delete the fuel pump ballast resistor, none of which should really be an issue unless you live in a state that still does emissions on these things. But it does fit in there, and I don't know, I'll have to see if the hood closes or if I gotta try to push it down even farther. The hose, though, is smaller than this fitting, so either you can get an adapter piece, like a 90-degree adapter piece, which will make it fit in here easier because it, it has to loop back on itself. I'll try spraying some WD-40 in it and see if I can slide it on there. So yeah, I got it on there with WD-40. I don't know if that's supposed to be a different diameter or not, but whatever, it's on there. Then you got to worry about this extra slack, obviously. I could just cut the hose shorter, but then we risk kinking it. So if you get like an elbow, like a 90-degree elbow, and cut the hose, and then like, you know what I'm saying? That'd probably work a little better. If we route it under the radiator cap, but above the top transmission line, and then cut it, that might be enough. I'm gonna leave a little bit of slack in it right here, and I think cut it right about there, and then again with some WD-40 on that son of a bitch. Something like that. So the overflow hose just makes a loose 90-degree turn and goes to the bottle, which, like I said, barely fits in there. And one of the tabs is broke off, but there were two self-tapping screws on the truck I got it out of, and there are holes that line up with where they should be, but I'm not going to try using those. It fits in there so tight, it's not going to go anywhere. Let's see if the hood closes. Oh, barely, but it does latch. This should be fine. For the wire harness, just shove it all the way towards the fender, as far as you can get it. And then it jams against the air box. You can kind of see the air box is sitting in there a little crooked, but it's an air box. And like I said, you don't actually need to use this bottle. You can use whatever bottle you want. You can stick the other end of the overflow hose into a literal water bottle, as long as it's submerged in liquid and there is liquid for it to suck up. Literally anything will work as an overflow tank. So it's just a matter of physical fitment and space. That's why on the 91 Plus 4 liters, they put the bottle way over here, because that's just where there's space to put it. So in summary, we got this pile of junk out of there. Might keep this as a memento. And we really cleaned up the engine bay. There's a whole lot more space in here now. There's not a whole bunch of useless junk clogging it all up. So yep, we got our basic heater hoses, nothing fancy there. We got a 2000 radiator, can be any radiator, 91 Plus. And now we're ready to start filling it with coolant. Definitely interesting to use a spill-proof funnel in a Comanche. I've never seen that before. Definitely going to be extra vigilant of leaks. I'm kind of concerned about that that temperature sensor plug thing that I took out for no reason. Alright, it stopped naturally burping itself. It's time for the first engine start. It's gonna idle really low when it's cold because I have the IAC unplugged. It's also misfiring now. Well, that's going to be because I was messing with the injector wiring. Yeah, you can see, whenever I twist the harness, it starts misfiring on different cylinders. It's really fun. Okay. Now nobody touch it. While we're sitting here waiting for it to warm up, I have the IAC unplugged because every now and then when you'd start it when it was warm, it would just idle at like 3,000 RPM. And it would stay idling at 3,000 RPM for like 2 to 5 minutes before eventually it would figure itself out, and then it would come down to 750. So this really high idle issue is an idle air control valve getting stuck. And because I don't want to get another Renix IAC, and because I also don't know if this is like an issue somewhere else, like it's probably with the wiring, honestly, as you saw. If you mess with that wiring harness at all, it starts misfiring and shit. So it's probably a chewed or broken wire somewhere. So in order to just, you know, not deal with that idling at 3,000 RPM issue, I just unplugged the IAC. So now it doesn't have any control over how it idles. But because it's a Renix, it doesn't care or know that. So when it's cold, it idles really low because it's trying to put more fuel in it because it knows it's cold. So the air-fuel mixture's way off and it causes the engine to idle really low and almost die. So you kind of got to help it when you first start it, just like a carbureted engine. And when it warms up, it idles kind of high. It idles at like maybe 1,000 because I unplugged the IAC when it was like halfway warmed up. So it'd be right in that middle sort of balance area where it will idle when cold, just barely. You gotta help it a little bit, and it will idle when warm. You just gotta, it goes a little too fast. You gotta help it calm down. I really like Renix because you can mess with it like that. You know, the computer has no idea the IAC isn't plugged in, and there's no check engine light. Like it doesn't give a shit. So that's why it idles weird. And really, the best way to describe how to operate it is like a carbureted engine. You know, a carburetor doesn't have an IAC, so you gotta help it when it's cold. You gotta give it a little bit more gas and let it warm up for like 15-20 seconds, and then you can let it off. And then when it's warm, it runs great. So that's what I got going on here. You can hear it's not even at operating temperature yet, but it's already running like way better. You know, it's smooth, it's calm. It figures itself out. Every time you start it, it has to relearn how to run. Ah, Renix. Some people have also yelled at me for how I pronounce Renix. It's Renix, not Renix, you idiot. It's a fake word. I can pronounce it however I want. Let's see how the heater works. Yeah, she's old, and it only works on high. So that'd be a blower motor resistor. Oh yeah, she's nice and warm now. There it is, gentlemen, the closed to open loop cooling system swap. Or more accurately, the sealed to recovery style coolant system swap. There's one more thing that we don't want to forget. If you have an automatic, disconnecting the transmission lines will lose a little bit of fluid. So let's see about that. It's in the safe zone still. Time for the test. So I've noticed it still does the Renix-y thing where the temperature gauge kind of bounces around a little bit before it eventually settles down and picks a spot to stay. So I guess that's normal. The transmission's definitely a little low on fluid. It's taken longer for it to grab the gears. We should be in fourth. There's the torque converter lock. We should still be in fourth, not third. There it goes. Okay. Yeah, I'll put some more fluid in it. Just throwing this out there, though, this would not be a problem with a manual. Automatics gotta go. Cooling system passed the highway test. Now it's time for the next test. The Culver's drive-through. We passed the Culver's drive-through test with flying colors. Now to get out of here without power steering. Oh. So everything's working. It's nice and warm. I've seen some bubbles coming up in the reservoir, so the overflow tube's working. There's no leaks anywhere. It's still wet from residual coolant I spilled earlier. We are at operating temperature. It's holding temperature good. Just gonna put some more transmission fluid in it. Just a little bit. Didn't lose very much at all, but you know how automatics are. And that's all there is to it. That's the open loop cooling system conversion done. I didn't actually buy any new parts at all for this. Bunny gave me the radiator. I got this from a junkyard for $5. And I got these heater hoses also from a junkyard for $5. So it's a grand total of $10 plus, you know, whatever the coolant cost. I don't know why I was putting this off for so long. It was a super easy job. I would recommend it on every Renix because that bottle, once that thing fails, you're dead in the water. But with this system, you can limp it. It has reserve coolant to take from when it's leaking somewhere. And that's what makes this the superior system. I do have a video dedicated to the radiator swap if you want to see that in more detail. The rest of this stuff is super easy though. You're just unplugging old hoses and putting new hoses in it. So yeah, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.